I was thinking of some cool things to share with all of you, and this would be a fun one for you, Mohammed, actually, because I know you're a mathematician. So I'm glad you jumped in. I'm working on I'm going to mute you, Marion, if you don't mind, just because the audio of your car. Um, I'm working on an essay on centrism, and that I'm sort of excited to put out sometime in December, and basically. Calling out that centrism and moderates or whatever is not actually a philosophy or a political position, but a psychological disposition of sort of fear of drastic change or systemic change. And I think it's an important point. I'm sort of it's a response kind of to like, I don't know, it went all over the internet, but Barry Weiss, giving her like talk between the 40-yard line kind of thing. And, I know Barry sort of, we were in similar circles, and I know a lot of people who like to, anyway, it's about moderates. And I also am sort of calling out Steven Pinker in it a little bit, but not even necessarily calling him out. I sort of am writing this part of the essay about Steven Pinker being kind of the the high priest of of the moderates, because all of his work is kind of he thinks a statistical sort of proof to sort of stay the course and avoid drastic change. And he referenced, I'm going to put it in the chat because I want you to dig into it because I'm so kind of baffled by it. Not a bit baffled. So he's at Harvard, of course, and Harvard has he referenced in this debate I was watching a study, excuse me, a study by Erica Chetoweth. I'll send it to you. I'll put it in the chat for everyone to look up. Who he basically was making the case that nonviolent protest is more effective than violent protest. And he references this study from looking at basically from all the protests from the year 1900 to modern day as in trying to quantify them. Very Steven Pinkerish to be like, well, let's just count. And the moderator pushes back a little bit, being like, well, what do you mean by effective? And then it was this very narrow, limited definition of regime change, like a protest on the street. And did they basically change the leadership of whatever, the country or the nation that they were after? And I found the study, and it is it was so infuriating to me. And I think you will be too. Let me find, it's called the uh, Nonviolent Action Lab at Harvard. And I'll put it in the chat. And for those who are watching this on replay, you'll just have to find it, Nonviolent Action at Harvard. So that's the lab, but they have their data set available to download, which I have done. You know, and I can share my screen because this will be the most effective way to do it for people who are enjoying their Thanksgivings or whatever. Here, I'll share my the screen. So this is their data lab. Here's Nav. Oh, here we go. I'm going to share this, and this will be a little sneak preview of what I'm going to rip into sometime this month. All right. So, excuse me. So this is what the nonviolent. Oops, sorry, wrong one. This is the Nonviolent Action Lab, whatever list of protests that they have sort of identified from the year 1900 onward. And what's so infuriating about it is it's a binary sort of yes or no attempt to quantify whether the effort was successful or a failure, and whether it was violent or nonviolent, which already is really, really, really troubling. Like, how do you call to pick any of them, like the Smile Revolution in Algeria, they're calling nonviolent, which is this little binary one or zero. It's either, one or zero in the violent or nonviolent, and a success. And so you can see the target here in column F is what they decided is specifically whatever the campaign in the group was doing, what their specific narrow single target was, which is a regime change or whatever, and whether or not they did it, including then also the year that this effort started and the year that this effort failed. And this data set has been criticized many, many times. So I actually did, I don't know if she'll say yes, I invited the kind of lead author in the center of this study onto the show. It would be really interesting. It would be it'd be one of my more difficult interviews. Um, but it's very clear. You can see I have green here for the nonviolent ones, and then green over here for successful nonviolent ones, and it's red for nonviolent or violent successful ones in their estimation. And it's very clear that they want the numbers to add up to somehow prove and show that nonviolent protest is more effective than not. To me, it's just a massive farce. So, for example, like, there's like 20 of them in here from China. Let's go down to like a country that I talk a lot about, Ghana, which I have reasons for talking a lot about. Like, it's hilarious to me to have two movements ever in the country of Ghana since the year 1900 that they can consider, I don't know, that made somehow their list. And something like this, the Convention People's Party movement, again, this is just one that I happen to know a lot about, which they say its target was to end British rule. This is Kwame Nkrumah's official political party. But they're saying it started in the year 1955, for example, which is hilarious to me, as if they weren't fighting and, for decades in the street. Kwame Nkrumah is in jail for his activities. You could call it, they're calling it nonviolent. And it was successful to eliminate British rule in 1957, which you could, I don't know. Anyway, this data set, I feel like, Mohammed, you would have a field day just sort of like exposing kind of how to lie with statistics, right? And to try and the problems with social, how would you call it, sort of quantifying social movements and protest in this insanely binary way that in the end, and I could show you the clip, and I'll stop sharing it because you can hear. You can find that on that thing I sent you to download if you want to play with the data set. But I want to expose show a clip of Steven Pinker, right? When you guys see this, when I polish it and make an essay out of it, who speaks very confidently and, puts this data out there of really what's under that and what's behind that, and kind of how to lie with statistics and how to fudge them and get them to say everything you want. For example, I could go back to it. In Palestine, they have like, how do you quantify the effort for Palestinian liberation? Like, first of all, you need to have a binary goal to measure whether it's successful or not. I suppose the end of Zionism or Israeli occupation, or is it a success if they get a state that, has 80% Palestinian autonomy? Like, I don't know how you measure that. Is it violent or non-violent? Do you have to break it down into like the first intifada? Anyway, I was just so offended by this data set that I feel like I'm going to try to put it into this illusion that that's how change happens, and this illusion that stay the course centrism, moderation is somehow leading to a better world. I don't know. I don't know if you have initial thoughts kind of on it. I don't know. It's not even really a mathematician question, but I feel like I'm glad you're here because you would be right to be offended by it.
So I was interested in Erica's work because of the Egyptian Revolution back then.
In whose work?
In Erica's work.
Oh, you know her work? Yeah, yeah. Okay.
And I don't know this Google Doc
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that you showed me, but I heard a talk she gave
Mm-hmm.
in Harvard, I think,
Yeah.
at some school of governance in Harvard. And her talk didn't reference this database,
Yeah.
but her talking points were all in all convincing to
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no reference to this binary. So when I see something binary, I'm really skeptical.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, interesting. Yeah, she's been on a lot of podcasts before. Excuse me, she does have a new book coming out. I hope she does say yes. And because I kind of had the same response to her. I like a lot of the things she says. But I guess it goes back to my this concern that I've been voicing on my show for some time now, including that Malcolm X episode of the relationship between violence and liberation. And I think this massive fear that, we want this to be true. what she says is the way that it works is through nonviolence. And I just don't know if it actually is true, which is not, so the debate that I'm referencing with Steven Pinker, I think the thing they were debating was, is violence ever justified? And that's what he was referencing this on. I hope she says yes. If she does, I might tap you for some advice as well. Because I think her new one, I'm going to look it up now. She has, and she may, I don't even know what she's been saying about Israel Palestine, probably somewhat moderate things. But I think her new book coming out, which is co-written, is called, with Sylvia Marks, it's called The End of People Power. And it says, investigating the puzzling decline in the success of civil resistance movements in the past decade. Um, so, I mean, I don't know if even by her own numbers, she's seeing that nonviolent civil disobedience is not working anymore. But anyway, very interesting one, but that's a little preview of
Yeah,
one
I mean,
thing that I'm working on. Yeah.
if you could invite her, that would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
My criticism to uh, mentioning mathematician and etc. So there is in math a subdiscipline called constructive math.
Hmm.
And this tries to diverge a bit from the classical math in the sense that it rejects things like truth value realism and Platonic. So there is this Platonic realm that tells you there is something,
Yeah.
have absolute truth, and this is somehow ontological because you believe that the math objects are there in some pre-existing
Yeah.
nature. And from this, you can easily derive something called truth value realism, that every proposition has really a truth value, which is yes or no. And this is crippling. This philosophy of math is really crippling.
Yeah.
And also inside of mathematics, there is a movement that started already at the beginning of the 20th century, led by a guy called Brouwer, who
Hmm.
it's something called intuitionism, because at that point, mathematicians somehow discovered formalism. Before that, was not so formal. But when formalism kicked in and the successes started to kick in, and then they somehow overcome the foundational crisis of math, people were somehow happy that they have now something that they could stick to, and they started deriving even meaning from the formalism. And in some sense, this somehow mummified math as if it's only this. And the criticism of people like Brouwer were not successful at the beginning, but now we really see that this is something wonderful. And a lot of mathematicians and physicists and philosophers and people working like Steven Pinker should know about this, that really truth finding is something really elaborate.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about the models that you build in constructive math is that you don't have binary truth. So you don't have yes, no, but you have something like, where is this proposition true?
Hmm.
So in some models, you have that the truth is predicated on places. So you say false is true nowhere and true is true everywhere. And there are intermediate truth values. So this proposition is true only here, but false there, and so on. And once you do things with location, you can do them also with time, right?
Hmm.
This proposition is still not true, but it's becoming true, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. And yeah,
And
this is
and
yeah.
yeah, and this is the logic we actually need for political theory and social.
Yeah, right. No, that's fascinating. Yeah, because the way here, if you want to, because you'll be helpful in this, I'm just going to put a bunch of links for everyone. The debate that I'm referencing was with Tariq Ali, and it's with this group. This is the full debate, I guess. Let me just link to it again in your own time. You'll see in that debate that I put in the chat for anyone who's watching without the chat, it's Is Violence Ever Justified? Steven Pinker, Tariq Ali, and Alif Sarakan. And Tariq Ali is great, but you'll see in Steven Pinker's first answer, the way that he so confidently and casually references statistics.
Yeah.
And I think people just kind of accept it of like, well, it's a number and he must know what it is and he's got these references and it's a Harvard mathematician and blah blah blah. And then you just scratch a little bit into like, well, what's this database actually look like? And I just showed you what it looked like, and it's like, well, I'll pull it back up for you actually because I'm curious since you didn't know it was there. You said you were interested in her work, kind of putting you on the spot. I'm sorry, and about Egypt. Let's see what she said about Egypt. Let me pull it over here. Gosh, I moved myself. So yeah, so it's got by location. So you tell me. So it looks like in Egypt, they've got what is that? 8 different distinct movements. And some of these are totally bizarre and overlapping all the time, where they've identified from 1918 to 1922
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Egyptian
yeah,
Revolution of Independence, which
yeah.
its target was to remove British colonial government.
Yeah.
They
But this was only partially. Yeah,
yeah,
actually, my family was involved in this resolution, the Barakat.
interesting. Interesting. Do you
And
agree
I
with her
know,
characterization that it's non-violent in nature or predominantly?
yeah, it was predominantly a non-violent, but there was violent against the demonstration.
Against. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I would say I would take this out of all the other stuff that she's mentioning, because this is the only revolution in Egyptian history that was really predicated on the notion of civic organization.
Interesting.
Everything else is completely different. And I
Yeah,
would say this is the only successful movement in Egyptian history, 1919.
interesting.
And everything else was not from bottom up, it was from top down. So,
Yeah.
for example, the 1952 revolution, which I think she doesn't mention
I
here,
don't
it's
even
called
think she has it. Yeah, yeah.
revolution, but this is somehow, and it was non-violent, by the way.
Mhm.
When Nasser took power, it was non-violent because the
Yeah,
king didn't really do anything. It was redefined as something coming from the people because the people somehow rushed around Naguib and Nasser and so on.
yeah. And what's
Uh,
so what's so infuriating about this kind of analysis, which just looking at the data is so it just leads out so much, is that also like that's one, you're saying this is like a successful movement and potentially long lasting, and it just counts as one piece of data here as a nonviolent successful movement. And then she's got literally, 2 movements within 2 years that also count just as one thing. We're an anti-Morsi protest and a pro-Morsi protest, which also seems like kind of weird to put in your own data set. And then, an insurgency that was violent but not successful. So it's just like if you were just looking at her data set and just looking at Egypt in the last 100 years, according to her, you would see, 8 distinct movements, 6 of them non-violent, 3 of them successful, all non-violent, and the 2 that were violent were not successful. Like this doesn't tell you anything,
it
right?
says
Like
nothing,
it says nothing. Yeah,
and
yeah.
especially this last thing. I mean,
Oh, I just got
look
rid of it.
at
Yeah.
what happened in Egypt. Uh, some of what she
Hmm.
describes as successful
Yeah,
was
we'll put it back up.
actually a coup d'état, right?
I'll put it back
So
up. Yeah, these ones from the 2003. You mean?
yeah, so the ones
Yeah,
that led to the ousting of Morsi, it was actually a coup d'état, redefined a posteriori as a civil uprising, but it was simply from the beginning
yeah,
motivated by the army, and it was hijacked by the army immediately.
yeah,
And this is why we have Sisi in power.
yeah, yeah.
So
And
it is something completely fake.
and like you're saying, with the problem that economists and mathematicians try to do social historical science like this is how would you it's impossible to factor in something like a non-violent movement that might become violent or have a threat of violence, right? Like, would Martin Luther King have been successful if Malcolm X and the Black Panthers weren't in the corner? And so, how do you quantify any of that stuff? Anyway, but maybe I've bashed her long enough, but it's been bashed. I think she has admitted that it's kind of a politically motivated piece of work. But this is like the third iteration of it, and Harvard funds it. I wouldn't, it's the kind of thing that it's the kind of thing that gets funded. if you're at a big Ivy League institution and you're going to make a non-violent center for protest or whatever, and come out with the conclusion that non-violence is better, and just you're probably going to find government funding coming your way.
So
Yeah,
I concede in the sense that currently I don't know of how to do this in a more informed way.
yeah. Does
But
anyone? Yeah.
I know that definitely not like that.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I will say, so from my work as a documentary filmmaker, I've recommended this one on the channel before. I'm sure you've seen it. If you haven't, Mohammed, I'll be ashamed of you. But everyone should watch The Square, which is a documentary. Marianne, I don't know if you've seen it, or John, who's logged in. The Square, you have seen it, right, Mohammed?
I forget names quickly, so
It's well then you're being publicly shamed now if you haven't seen it. It's such a good documentary, but this is the kind of way that I, as a filmmaker, would say like this is how to engage with these things. It's a documentary crew that's embedded in the Arab Spring in Egypt during all of that kind of stuff. It's so good. Everyone watch it for homework, and then you could tell me.
is it just called The Square?
The Square, yeah, The Square. Can't recommend it highly enough. It's so good.
When I
Uh,
Google The Square, I get a lot of stuff.
I'll
So,
show you. I'll put it up here so everyone
but
sees it.
probably I saw it.
It's
So
a
probably I
2007. Oh yeah, you know what? There's another film called The Square. Sorry, 2013. It's called. Here, I'll put it up here so everyone can see it because it has a cool poster too. This one, I guess Netflix bought it at some point, but this one, The Square, 2013.
ah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so good. And so that one,
Okay.
yeah, it's an embedded crew that's following the uprising of the Arab Spring, which I think this is like mandatory viewing now because I keep saying on the channel, like the forces are sort of recombining again for another Occupy and Arab Spring. I don't know this one's going to be edgier and a little angrier. But this one, it follows this sort of group of liberal protesters who were certainly more pro-democracy, liberal, secular young people, and who really kind of start that revolution, as you know, and have just grew tired of all the bullshit and tired of the corruption. And you do see, excuse me, the Muslim Brotherhood come in and sort of set up shop in the same square and these really fascinating dynamics. But it's an incredible piece that also, to this point about mathematics and election results and everything like that. And I pointed this out on the show ages ago, way after October 7th, of somehow even election results in a place like that can tell you almost nothing about what people are really feeling or like the level of Islamism in the country or whatever, because you'll see the way that the Muslim Brotherhood kind of hijacks the experience. And then, we live in a world, especially in America, we learn to think this way, but very binary, right? Democrat, Republican, left, right. It's always this red, blue. It's like a football game. And it's almost never like that on the field. There's more forces involved, and you have the military sort of
Absolutely.
regime being represented. You've got this, I don't know if you totally classify the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt as a pure Islamist group, but certainly Islamist leaning, and these things are complicated, as we said. They have
Yeah.
anti-colonial roots, and they're very
Yeah.
pro-Palestinian, but also, you know, roots that Nasser would have hated. And then these like liberal secular kids who want, an American style democracy or whatever. But because the choice kind of boils down at the end to the two realistic choices of, oh shit, it's going to be either the Muslim Brotherhood candidate or the military guy, you see that one of the heroes of the film, who's this very liberal kid who really hates the Muslim Brotherhood. He doesn't like any of the stuff they're preaching, kind of reluctantly celebrating the victory because it was, the end of the military regime. And it's a lesson for all of us to learn as we, I'm going to also be talking more on the show about what's happening on the right wing in America. And my wife and I talk about these things. The classic my enemy is my friend kind of stuff, what's happening with Nick Fuentes. And, I feel like we all do have to prepare for
Yeah.
these very strange alliances and bedfellows. I don't know, I'm not a political scientist. I'm more of a philosopher and a writer. So I don't, I don't have maybe great instincts there. but I have tons of fears of keeping people at certain arms distance. But the Square is a great lesson. We don't have to look too far in history for it. So yeah, watch the Square, Mohammed. If you haven't, you'll love it, and you'll. I would love to hear. Email me or something after. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. We can talk about it next time. But yeah, great film.
I had a look at it definitely, but already
Yeah.
at that point when I saw it, I had a different framework to explain what was happening.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And I was connected to a lot of people during the revolution,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and I could tell you tons of stuff. And there is a simple framework that, for example, would explain why 1919 worked out. So this means
Hmm.
where we really had a parliamentarian democracy and where really we were able to put people in government and so on, but still it wasn't full success because the king was against it. The
Yeah.
King Fahd, not King Farouk, so not the last one, but his father was against it. And why it eventually faded out, and the really big difference to what happened in 2011. And there is a framework that really explains why this was inevitable and why the Muslim Brotherhood are not really the enemy of the government, but there is just the other organized player in the country. And it was for the deep state, the Muslim Brotherhood was a predictable other player,
Hmm.
whereas the revolutionaries, at least when they looked as if they are a homogeneous player, one player, they looked very scary to the government.
Yeah.
So, and of course, they were just temporarily, they looked as if they are a one player, but it was just the euphoria of the revolution that looked that this took this discrete set of people who don't have a common agenda really, and made them seem as if they are one major player in the game. And this is why the deep state preferred more the player it knows since 70s, 80, 90 years
Yeah.
over the other ones. And the other ones started to fragment and fragment and fragment when the narrative that was gluing them faded away. They simply discovered they have a little in common.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was really interesting how got connected to people. So it was somehow a chain or a web of connections. And at the end, I was talking to every one of them, and he was in his little isolated circle. So all these
Hmm.
people that did me, I got them connected to really isolated subsets of the revolution.
Yeah, you're gonna love revisiting the film if you haven't seen it, and anyone else listening. Everything you just said kind of plays out by the end. I remember there's this scene after the election where they're kind of sitting in like a cafe and talking and sort of lamenting the splintering that they know is coming. Um, that's fascinating.
But
Yeah,
this makes sense. A lot of this
yeah,
makes when you see that actually the framing of the whole thing. So you really need a good framework to understand what's happening, and then the framework should really simplify. So it shouldn't complicate. It should really simplify, and then you see, yes, this was in some sense very clear, and
yeah,
it is inevitable, and it explains a lot of details. So then you can zoom out and understand why Egyptians would lose also the next revolution and
yeah.
what needs to be changed. And of
Hmm.
course, it is this analysis. I wanted to understand why this chance was lost in such a
Yeah, yeah,
painful way.
yeah, yeah. No, that's great.
And
Um,
it's not about not about violence or non-violence. It's
yeah,
about
yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, I think we bashed that database enough. Maybe I should shift gears for any, so we don't, but that's fascinating. I'm gonna definitely revisit it. I was gonna share with you guys some stuff because I was feeling like I want to give give back more to you, and I mentioned it last time. I wonder if I have it. The film I did that is not public, and I think even Marion or someone was asking me about it. I don't have it here. I'm going to put in the chat when I find it. Do I not have this one on here? The film that I made ages ago about international law, which is totally like I do have it here, non-findable thing. I'll give you guys a like totally a link that I think I have permission to share. When you are when you have time. That's a film I made a while ago. That's probably a rough cut, actually. Does that work if someone clicks on it? I think it does. Or is it it might even have some errors in it. It might be password protected. For those who are watching not live, which is most of you, I'll put it in the description. Does that work, that link?
Yeah, it seems to.
Awesome, great. That's a film I made when you went to watch something about an hour and a half, which I filmed in Israel and Palestine, amongst many other places, which is really interesting now. Maybe I could share some of it here. But it's a film about international law in a competition called the Jessup Cup. Ages ago, I actually had someone on the show from it. Maybe I'll share.
Think of Jessup. I shall never think of it as a competition or a journey to Washington. It's now a journey to my life.
I build walls. Basically, I don't share any sad or disappointed moments with the people that I love. I've been through a tragedy process just to have the right to live in my country. I decided to study law in order just to make a little change.
Arija Rajabi is from Jerusalem and she lives on a refugee camp in Jerusalem. To get here to the university, she has to pass 2 checkpoints, and sometimes they might not even let her pass. She might have to even go home. Arija's smart and she's nice to be around. She hides a lot of her personal problems and puts it aside because she's actually a very sensitive person with a lot of problems that she doesn't let anybody know about it, and she just keeps on going on.
I was forbidden from passing the checkpoint, so I missed my exam. أنا أجل طب شفت الدكتور عبد السماوي اليوم شو؟ طيب شكرا كده. أوكي شكرا.
There are 3 reasons for which you can have a legitimate justification for incomplete and reschedule. One is that one member of your family died, second that you entered hospital, and third that you are arrested. So we have many cases in which students, the day of the exam, they are arrested, they are forbidden to enter a checkpoint, and if it's justified, we can consider it as a legitimate reason for which they reschedule the final exam.
Thank you. So I have to deal with that every day. I have to deal with that, and it's okay. It became part of my personality. With time, you stop having emotion. I don't have emotion. I don't get angry. I don't cry.
She's very strong. She's very, she's an inspiration. She really inspires me. I mean, she had a lot of you know, shots after each other. You know, it was really hard. I mean, her brother passed away, her father is handicapped, all these problems, and yet she comes back even stronger. I'm so proud of her. As a friend, I'm so proud of her.
Heidi, حبيبي. This is Lamar, the youngest. Say hi. I have a big family, and my father, who is supposed to finance the family, is sick, can't work, and the whole family is depending on me to finance it. Being in Palestine makes you very familiar with the laws, with the international laws. Almost all people all around the world without occupation, they are living their lives. And I am struggling to live my life. I know that life is not about having fun all the time. I can't live a normal life without struggles. It's like struggles are part of my personality, are part of the Palestinian personality. I have 4 brothers and 3 sisters, but I lost one of my brothers this summer in a car accident. I'm angry on everything, on why me, why this life, why my father, why Israel, why Palestine, why everything. Ahmed and my cousin went for a ride on the bicycle. A woman came from nowhere on the street. She crashed them both. Ahmed flew on the sky and he came back on the ground on the back of his head. I went to my neighbor. I told him that we should call an Israeli hospital to send him an ambulance to get him out of Hebron. On the checkpoint, they got dogs and soldiers, and it was like a nightmare. They keep asking to see the card ID number of Ahmed and the proof that he is not Palestinian. And they also refuse to accept my cousin since he's a West Bank citizen, he's Palestinian. But my brother is supposed to be considered as an Israeli citizen. The process of moving him from the Palestinian hospital to the Israeli hospital took from 11 a.m. till 5 a.m. in the morning. They started doing tests and things like that. He told me, if you get him before 5 hours ago, we could open his head and get the blood out of it. He could survive, but you are too late. It's a checkpoint. It is for the state of Israel. All of them are. Understanding law, studying law, would let you understand what is happening with you. My ultimate goal, I want to be a real ICG lawyer, and I think that the JSIP competition is the first step to accomplish that goal. I put everything you can imagine in preparing for the JSIP.
أنا اتجوزت وكان لازم أقدم توجيهي. قدمت توجيهي بعد ما اتجوزت، كنت حامل في أريج وكنت أدرس إشي، وهو الإشي ما هو بيأثر يعني كيف الأم بتكون، يعني بأثر على البيبي في بطنها وإشي. هي يعني وهي في بطني قدمت توجيهي. بحس بإني أنجزت أنا، إني ربيت خلفت يعني بنت عبقرية وإشي. يعني أريج يعني بسبب السعادة في بيتنا.
They don't have anyone else but me, so I don't want them, any of my family, to live another disappointment. This year, I have the knowledge, the experience, and the dedication to give it to Jessup. I think I will do my best, and I'm hoping that it will work out.
I'll have a link to the full film. That was just the Palestine section. Oh, it's still playing. The next one goes to India next. But yeah, thought I would just share that since it's been a long time. But I will also share. So that was filmed in 2011 or 2012. She lives in Jabalia, which is in East Jerusalem. So it's like this weird refugee camp that's kind of on the, if you would say, Israeli side of the 67 border, but a Palestinian refugee camp in East Jerusalem. This crazy situation, this no man's land where you have to get in and out of basically like the neighborhood through a checkpoint, and it's jam packed. But she is now married, and she lives on the Israeli side 10 years later, and or whatever that is, how many years later. And we were texting a little bit after October 7th when all this stuff happened, and I invited her to come on the podcast actually, and she told me that she really wished she could, but she doesn't feel safe now, and she can't because of the environment of her neighbors and her kids and everything, and it's yeah, it's wild. So that's yeah, just a little taste of something I filmed there. And if you'll learn in the film what the Jessup Cup is, which is an international moot court competition. It's like American Idol for international law students. They do like a fake case once a year all over the world. It was a really amazing job. I got sent all over the world to film this thing, but that film's not available anywhere because it basically is like, it's not like a huge commercial film. It's used as kind of a recruiting tool for the Jessup Cup. So you guys wouldn't have an opportunity to see it elsewhere. So now you can watch it and enjoy. And it's, yeah, so we filmed in Palestine and Israel with the team at Hebrew University, Colombia, Germany, actually. Where else am I forgetting? India. It was really fun. All over the world. Finland. It was a good time. And I won't ruin for you who wins in the end, but it's not the Palestinian team. So I'll say that. But yeah, that's a little bit of that. And then I'll also, like I said, in more relevant matters to the show and to Dilemma, I am going to right now make to members only for you guys this interview with Melanie McAllister available that I just think is so good. So I don't know if anybody has anything else on their mind. I also wanted to ask you guys, since I've been so focused on Israel-Palestine on the show for so long, about other topics of interest that you guys might have. I mean, Platonic mathematics would be an interesting one of all things. But if there's anything else, Marion or John, who are logging in here, or of course anyone who watches this in retrospect, to put in the comments. Before October 7th, back before I was sort of doing the YouTube video thing, I had shows about AI and grief and all kinds of random interesting things. And I am interested and eager to get into other topics of sort of general philosophical interest that you guys are interested in. So I don't know if there's topics to suggest or other interesting people that you guys have in your mind. John, I see a little hand. I don't know how to do the emoji thing, but I see a hand. So I don't know if you have, yeah.
Yeah, I was just, I wanted to ask, have you ever heard of a philosopher named C.T. Gwynn?
No, I don't think so. Can you spell it? C.T. Gwynn?
Yeah, it's the initial C, and then the name T.H.I.
Oh.
And then Wen is Nguyen.
Yes, I think so. I haven't read this. Did he do this book on games?
Yes, games, agency is art.
Cool. And a recent one. Yeah.
How familiar are you with like Wittgenstein's notion of like language is actually language games?
Yeah.
And meaning emerges through this interplay of subjectivity within a given form of life.
Yeah, that is right up my alley. I actually used Wittgenstein in a consciousness presentation I was giving about his language games. You might even know more about it than I do. You know, I read a few chapters and enough to reference him in a talk, but this definitely sounds right up my alley. And he's got a new book coming out. It looks like called The Score in
It,
2026. Yeah.
yeah, he's been doing Gwen's been doing some work since, obviously, in the last 5 years since games came out. But it's interesting because Wittgenstein had
Hmm.
basically posited that, like, there's really no sort of universal definition for what a game is.
Yeah.
And excuse me, years ago, another philosopher named Bernard Suits
Hmm.
published a paper called "What is a Game?" And in it, he posits a definition
Hmm.
for games that is universal. Right? It
Hmm.
applies to any and all kinds of games you could think of. Um,
I love
hang on a
it. I just
second.
found that it's like the voluntary attempts to overcome unnecessary obstacles. And I
Right.
that's
Yes.
awesome. I love that. I had to share the
Right.
screen because that's so fucking good.
So basically, Suits says that a game begins with a pre-lusory goal. That is like
Huh.
the
That's sweet.
pre-game goal of, in Wynn's example, basketball, is to get a ball in a hoop, right?
Yeah.
But there are also constitutive rules, and those rules seek not the most efficient way to
Hmm.
get a ball through the hoop, but the least efficient way, or a less efficient way anyway.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So
Oh, I like that.
there's a
Yeah.
defense. You've got to dribble. You can only take 2 steps without dribbling, and you've got to throw the ball up and get it to go through the top of the hoop.
Yeah.
So these are all the constitutive rules, and they apply constraints to the way the game is played. And this creates what Suits calls illusory means.
Hmm.
And so Wynn argues that, through this setup, having the pre-illusory goal, constitutive rules, and the illusory means, you um, we actually, uh, how does he put it? We have a plasticity to our
Hmm.
agency, which is that we can temporarily adopt these goals and shape our agency around the very activities of accomplishing the goals.
Hmm.
Right. And so it's the whole thing, the pre-illusory goal, and the constitutive constraints, as well as the illusory means, they make possible this certain kind of activity,
Yeah. I
and
love
then
this. I love everything. I'm definitely gonna reach out to him. Yeah, yeah, go on, because this is
right, and
fascinating.
then
Yeah, yeah.
well, and then he carries this much further, right? Because beyond the realm of games, obviously, if our agency is actually this plastic, if we can have this sort of malleability with how we structure our agency, then agency is the medium on which games play.
Hmm.
It's the like your medium is film, the
Yeah.
medium of games is agency, and so if my thought is extending, of course, is I'm actually thinking about this now because after Sarah Hurwitz and Melanie Phillips have given their little crazy speeches these last
That's
week or so.
I've seen them both. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then thinking about how, like months ago now, I think it was, The Intercept came out and they had found they'd gotten hold of a memo from New York Times editors saying you can't use genocide, you can't say,
Hmm.
you can't say Palestine, you can't, all of these little style guide restrictions for reporters. And so I'm thinking about this and how, Wittgenstein says meaning emerges through language games,
Hmm.
and kind of looking at how, someone like Hurwitz and Phillips can honestly just sit there and say, talk about speaking through a wall of dead children and thinking that you're somehow going to rationalize that, that
Yeah.
there's a way to get through that. But like for me, I see it as taking Gwyn's ideas of game theory applied to Wittgenstein in his language games. The way that we structure our vocabulary around conflicts like the genocide in Palestine, that the way that our public vocabulary is structured, it creates the possibility for what is thinkable, for what is even legible, right? And at the same time, it also shuts off other possibilities, right? And
Yeah.
when you consider, like, Said's old complaint that Palestinians are not permitted to narrate,
Yeah.
the the consequence of that is that we get to where we are now, and Palestinians are relegated to, what Franz Fanon would call the zone of non-being,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Anything can be done to them because they're not beings. They're
I
simply
think,
not human.
yeah, there's something really, really good there. I'm going to explore it. I mean, my first thought when you were just was looking up suits and his definition there is also on the unnecessary obstacles. And I have to reference, I got Dave Graeber's, it's not a new book because he's dead, obviously, but David Graeber is a new collection of his essays, and the one in here, not all of his essays, but the last one in here is "What's the point if we can't have fun?" And you would like this, John, if you get a hold of this book. It may have been published elsewhere, but I won't ruin it for you. But he has kind of a really great finish in his last essay on the nature of play and fun and what makes us human, and very central to this idea of unnecessary obstacles, actually. Yeah, there's something that's really, is that your original thought, to combine Wittgenstein to narration? Because I think that there's something really, really good there about political narration that definitely speaks to the way I think and the way that I understand things. In fact, my wife and I, when we're when we're having our really fun nights with, I think I'm allowed to say I do psychedelics on a YouTube live, but when we have some of our more exploratory nights, it's a lot about narration and a lot about the story of who we are, who I am, or what the world is. And because I do like Wittgenstein, and I think of language as how to put this, an infinitely inadequate vessel for the conscious experience, right? Words
Right.
can never capture it. And so it might not be a unnecessary obstacle as in inventing a game, but we're like forced to, through narration, through storytelling, I'm a filmmaker, right? Through the ideas of telling a story and a myth and compressing things, or recommending a documentary here to understand anything. All of that is like always inadequate for the sort of infinite experience of consciousness. And so, but it's kind of all we have. And so denying the Palestinians like you were saying, the sort of right to narrate themselves, is it's like beyond dehumanization. If you're thinking of it this way, it's even beyond that. It's such an erasure of even the opportunity to play the game of being human, which is to participate in narration, because it's the only way to kind of prove anything, that anyone was here, right? Like, I always think of the classic "I was here" graffiti scribbled on a bathroom wall or whatever, and there's always something so simple and so profound about the instinct for a human to prove that we existed and that we really were here. And it's just a story, right? It's just molecules and atoms kind of telling themselves a story that they matter, but there's something so like beautiful and sacred in the active narration. No, that's quite good. I'm gonna reach out. I think I'll probably try to time it. His book looks like it comes out in January, so really soon. So maybe I'll grab it and see if I could get him on, sometime in early spring. But that's an awesome recommendation. My mind was spinning on it for sure. And even just one more thing, because I was talking about this with a friend who's a musician. Sure, everybody's noticed. Here you go. I'm sure everybody's noticed this phenomenon. of the desire for a sort of like analog and this like vintage world in a very digital world we have, right? Like I actually just picked up a film camera again for really the first time in 20 or 30 years. I used to have one, and amongst all the moves, I lost one, and I was like, I really miss my film camera. And as an experiment, or this is actually a good game. You'll like this one, John. As a game, since I just moved to Berlin, and I don't really know this city that well, I was like, I'm going to come up with a game for myself to kind of force myself to pay attention and observe in a different way, and see if I can sort of artistically integrate myself for my own sort of conscious being. And so I got myself a very inefficient piece of equipment, right? Like it's an analog film camera, and I loaded it up with my Kodak 200, and it's got 30 exposures or whatever it is on it. And I've come up with a little game for myself where another roll of film that's not developed yet, where like I've assigned that this roll of film will have sort of a theme. Maybe I'll share this on the channel when it's done, when they're done. So like I come up with sort of like a theme or even a poetry or an inspiration for this thing, and then go try to find frames that I sort of can observe and be patient with, and then find and click, and then go develop. And so my first theme, this one's sort of a test one, was waiting, the concept of waiting. And I don't really know what that means, but I'm like exploring Berlin on my bike with my little camera and thinking of this like concept of being patient and waiting, and seeing if I could sort of comment on it or capture it in this little camera. And then I'll go develop it. And it's sort of like a little personal game I made for myself that's completely unnecessary as the illusory thing would be. But I'm not, everyone, I think even the Gen Z kids, and I've referenced this on the show before, they're all addicted to their phones or whatever, but they are expressing this desire for the analog and a rejection, whether or not they can successfully do it, of the frictionless digital world where everything is easy and available to them. I think it speaks to this thing you're talking about, and I'm guessing in the score, this upcoming book, he's going to talk about that, this desire for friction, this desire for obstacles to be in our way, because it sounds very cliche, but that life is not about the goal but the path. And so if the goal is to listen to a great song, well, you could just fire up Spotify and find it in 2 seconds, or you could go buy a record player and go find the record in a basement and put it on and put the needle on, and the result is similar, but the experience is so different. And there is this desire for the game to make the world the kind of obstacle course that it should be. Another guy, as a reference, Matthew B. Crawford, who I interviewed way back when the show was just audio, one of my favorite writers. He wrote Shop Class as Soulcraft, if anyone knows that book, which was a mega hit ages ago. And then he wrote The World Beyond Your Head, which I think was a masterpiece, which was his second book. He writes a lot about this desire and need philosophically to use your hands and to be engaged in the world. And he's sort of a champion of the Luddites, who were resisting the smooth automation of a frictionless world. Anyway, those are my riffs on it, John, but that sounds awesome. I don't know if there's anything more you want me to think about, but I'm gonna.
Yeah, well, no, just but to
bookmark
answer
the
your
book.
question,
Yeah.
I don't know that it's so much an original idea per se.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just I'm connecting dots that I think
yeah,
like when probably isn't going to be reading George Lakoff and Mark Johnson.
yeah.
Are you familiar with
Yeah.
like Philosophy in the Flesh and Metaphors We Live By?
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course Richard Rorty as well. His that
Yes.
post-Rorty pragmatism, where we look at the sort of how final vocabularies shape
Yes.
what is thinkable, what is sayable, right? That language is constitutive of thought, of our concepts, right? That
Yeah.
that these things are wholly intertwined, and
Yeah.
so if we can't speak things like Israel's committing a genocide and Palestinians are human, then that possibility simply doesn't exist.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Yeah, no, I'm putting it on my list. There is something very, very 1984-ish about the language that is being allowed or policed or morphed. And I don't know who's winning that battle, but it is something, I mentioned this last time, but I think I sort of had my first taste of it, Mohammed, since you're also in Germany, that I mentioned last time. My wife and I were having these discussions about moving to Berlin in Germany, which we're really doing for work and for friends otherwise, but knowing that we're stepping into a situation that is less politically free in thought and certainly in speech. By the way, totally random thing for people to look up. I tried to look up the free speech laws in Berlin and in Germany, and it's written in such a bizarre way. If anybody could decipher that for me, I don't know if you know this, Mohammed, like, because I'm an American, so I just know the First Amendment. And I was like, what did they actually write here in Berlin? And it's very strange in a lot of the European countries. They always focus on this thing called like honor, like if it somehow damages the I don't know. Anyway, some legal scholar of European free speech laws can explain that to me about damaging the honor of, so I don't know what it really means. But I think just this last weekend, well, it's still Sunday, so like even just 2 days ago, or maybe yesterday even, I think there was marches for Palestine all over Europe, again, as there have been, but not here in Berlin. And it was like kind of the first instance since I moved here of like, okay, like it's something that I might not be able to participate in as much. So there is an Orwellian aspect to this whole thing. I should also share, maybe I'll share it on a post on YouTube. I've been going to the library here, and there is a very funny, this will just be an inside joke between the members of Dilemma and me now, a very funny chat going on the bathroom door on the inside between someone who's very clear pro-Palestinian and someone who's very clearly is pro-Israel, and they keep crossing each other's stuff out and writing something else. I think I'm just going to post it for all of you to see who wins this random battle happening in the wall. But that's the kind of place where these language games, John, on the inside of bathroom walls are taking place in some ways. But no, yeah, that's an interesting thought. It's funny. I asked for like things beyond Israel Palestine, but I'm just like you, where I'm like, it's kind of all relating to this, back to the same places. I don't think it's a accident when I mentioned Barry Weiss, maybe before you logged on, in this essay that I'm writing on centrism, that she used a sports analogy to talk about what we can or should talk about between the 40-yard lines. I don't know if you saw her do this. It was sort of widely made fun of because she was talking about how charismatic Alan Dershowitz was, which was the part people made fun of. But I think this idea that how to put this, John, it's like that they know it is a game. They just want us to play their game, right? Like it's
right.
Which is maybe a step in the right direction, where Hillary Clinton's going around trying to teach people history now, and like I think they know that they're not speaking some ultimate truth. They've moved beyond trying to tell us that we're all lying, or that they have the ultimate truth. They've moved to this, maybe you mentioned Richard Rorty or whatever, this more what they think is sort of dangerous truths, and therefore maybe like a pragmatism. Sounds like you, John, you're familiar with that like branch of philosophy of the pragmatists, and I think Jordan Peterson is kind of a champion of them as well.
Well, Jordan Peterson is a champion of an idea of pragmatism that he has in his head that has nothing to do with, for instance, C.S. Peirce or Richard Rorty.
Or the William James kind of stuff. Yeah, Richard Rorty, by the way.
Not even William James either. Yeah. I'm not a fan of James. I'm more a Peircean, but
yeah. Why don't you send me some stuff on that, actually, because it's like, I don't know as much about the pragmatist argument, but it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that is a bit of what we're dealing with here in the philosophical realm as well. I don't know.
Right. Well, the thing about pragmatism, like Peirce, he was writing at the late 1800s, and for instance, he has a series called On the Logic of Science, or Illustrations of the Logic of Science. And he begins it with an essay called "The Fixation of Belief." And in
Mm-hmm.
that, he basically discusses this idea. Well, first he has to start, explaining like what he thinks a belief is, and this is, I kind of think, where the crux of his whole philosophy kind of fits in with my post-Rortian pragmatism.
Hmm.
Um, but he says, that human beings as individuals, we all have beliefs. We all get plenty of beliefs, and we get them not through any rational process, not through any logical, any kind of logical uh,
Hmm.
process or investigation. But rather we get it through socialization, through acquiring language. That's where all our first beliefs come from, right? And that's
Yeah.
because his definition for a belief is a habit of thought that shapes our desires and guides our actions,
Hmm.
right? So much like Wittgenstein later, you would say, that meaning is doing, language is doing,
Hmm.
not, that it's not a rational or logical exercise. It's a doing in the world. It's engaging the world in our own subjectivity with this stuff outside of us.
Yeah.
Um, and
Hmm.
then Rory's very much the same way, where he's like, the world cannot speak, only we do. You
Yeah.
know, he says
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
to say that the world is out there is to say with common sense that there are things in time and space which do not depend, or their effects in time and space whose causes have nothing to do with human mental states,
Hmm.
right? But he says to say that the truth is not out there is to say that where there are no sentences, there is no truth.
Yeah. 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 That's fascinating. I thought I was going to make it through a hangout without mentioning Sam Harris, but Richard Rorty was actually Sam's advisor, and they used to fight all the time, which may uh, probably won't surprise you knowing Richard Rorty's work. Um, but that yeah on yeah. So is that, and it's different than idealism in your view? I just wanted to ask that.
Yeah, well, that's what
Yeah.
sorry, I got sidetracked there, and I
No, no,
began with
no.
Peirce, but
Yeah.
this idea that basically, if you read the fixation of belief, particularly that first couple of sections of it, he ends up saying at some point that, if a person could just go through life without having met any cause to doubt any one of their beliefs, that they would be just fine without ever
Yeah.
having subjected any of their beliefs to any kind of logical investigation. And so he's positing, like what I imagine is a sort of Chauncey Gardner type
Yeah.
figure, from the movie Being There.
Yeah. 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 Of course.
One
Yeah.
of my favorites. But
Yeah.
but he basically says, you could easily go through life without ever having to do any work to fix a belief whatsoever. You simply go with the belief you've acquired.
Yeah.
But he says in fixing belief, then the real question, the real central problem, which should be for philosophy, for epistemology, is not then how individuals fix belief, but how we fix beliefs in the community as a whole,
Yeah.
right? Because there's, me personally, as a US citizen, I have a belief that Palestinians deserve to have their human rights recognized. But what do human
Crazy.
rights even mean
Yeah.
in a context where you have this colonial erasure and annihilation going on? And I look back at like the broken treaties between us
Hmm.
and the indigenous people of Turtle Island here, the genocides of hundreds of distinct linguistic, political, and historical cultures. Just there's this idea that these people simply do not belong to the future. And
Yeah.
Lewis Gordon talks a bit about this. He's not really my favorite decolonial philosopher right now, since his decolonialism doesn't extend to Israel. But
Hmm.
he does talk about this idea that taking from Fanon's zone of non-being, that for instance, if you go back and look at the Dakota War of 1862,
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I write about this in my new book, by the way. So yeah.
right, right.
Coming out
So
about
then
yeah.
you'd be familiar with this, right? So the Dakota, they don't encounter the U.S. until 1837,
Yeah.
right? They have this huge swath of territory. It includes a little piece in the north that's east of the Mississippi, but most of it would encompass about 5 or 6 Midwest states west of the Mississippi, as we have the map now, right? So it's a huge expanse of territory, and they have cultivated land, but it's not done in the European way. They have more what we might call, food forests in
Yeah.
a kind of solar punk way. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And they're also very mobile because they follow bison herds and things like that seasonally, and so their culture, their society, their way of life, or what Lemkin would call their national pattern, is extremely different, polar opposite to the English, to the Americans at that time. But, their interaction for a couple of centuries had been only with French trappers, and traders. And those people were not actually looking to colonize their land, to
Yeah.
replace the native population with their own population. And so in 1837, the Dakota first make their first treaty with the U.S., and they agreed to cede lands east of the Mississippi, right? And then, well, the U.S. violates that treaty, so they've got to go make another one. Then the U.S. violates that treaty, so they got to go make another one. So then by the time we get to 1861, 1862, the winter of 1860-61 was really harsh. The Dakota had been forced into a narrow strip of land 20 miles wide
Yeah.
along, I'm guessing about 100 miles I think it's the Missouri River. I can't
Yeah, I think
remember
so.
what
Yeah,
river
yeah.
flows through there, but they're confined to this really really small parcel of land, and they have to buy on credit, hunting trapping implements so that they can keep up with the pace of the Europeans in their market. They have to adopt European ways of farming and cultivating crops, and including the European types of crops. And so in 1861, they have a huge crop failure and they're starving,
Yeah.
and that continues on into 1862. And so by the fall of 1862, they're facing another, harsh winter of no food. And they, the colonial authority owes them. The government, should have given them thousands of dollars. The government should have given them provisions that they were promised. But of course, white businessmen stepped in the middle, one of those being John Jacob Astor. Actually, his representatives were the ones that were responsible for putting the Indians in debt for the fur trading stuff that they had
Mhm.
to acquire in order to even participate in the business. Um, but anyway, the point is, right, that there's all of this encroachment and incursion, and none of it involved actual combat. There were no wars between the Dakota and the Americans until we get to that point in 1862. And finally, about 400 or so of the warriors got tired of it and they said, we can't do this. We can't continue this way. We want to declare war. And so they did. And they slaughtered
Yeah.
about 500, including soldiers, but mostly settlers, and kidnapped another 250 settlers, mostly women and children, and
Hmm.
um, of course, that was a big sensational thing. And when it
Yeah.
came time for the U.S. to respond, of course, they said, well, these are murderers and rapists,
Yeah.
quote unquote, and they should be dealt with harshly. We should punish them. We need to send a message to others so that they know not to mess with us, like this. It's the whole entire thing, right? And what's kind of wild to me is that there's only one guy, right? That, long story short, like once this is all sort of dealt with by the army, and they rounded everyone up and put them into a concentration camp near the
Yeah.
fort. I forget what the name of it is, but um, they hold these military tribunal show trials where they try on nearly 400 cases in something like 6 weeks. Cases didn't take minutes. It's like, and there's out of the 390 some, 303 are convicted and sentenced to death.
Yeah.
And
yeah. No,
at the time, Lincoln has to approve all of those, right? So when it was sent to Lincoln, all the people involved, including the governor of Minnesota and everybody else, said, no, we need to deal with them harshly, uphold all these sentences, we need to kill them all. And it's only one guy, the Episcopal minister, the bishop in Minnesota, a guy named Whipple, who argues to Lincoln that no, the laws of war should apply. And in the laws of war, killing is not murder. It's not criminal.
Yeah.
I think it was partially because of this influence, and partially because Lincoln was a rather sensitive lawyer himself, that he commuted most of the sentences, and it was only 37 that ended up hanging in the end.
I thought it was 38. I don't know. Maybe I wrote it wrong.
Might be 38. It was 37 or 38. I know one was commuted near the very, like right before the sentence was carried out, because they found out that he wasn't actually involved in hostilities. But I find this interesting because the analogs here to our present situation are one-to-one, where you have this people, and I use, Fanon's zone of non-being here because I think it really fits quite well, because here are people that are neither considered under the customary laws of war, which, should have applied. Neither are they considered under the civil laws, right? They don't get due process. They don't have a right against self-incrimination. They don't have a right to a lawyer. They don't even have a right for the proceedings to be conducted in a language they understand. So here they are, completely set outside any legal framework, and it's like George Bush's unlawful combatant. Well, there's no such thing in international law. There are combatants and there are non-combatants. Right? And but setting these people outside the law completely, it'll basically means that anything can be done to them. Anything is justified.
Just two responses. That's amazing. I knew a little of the story, which I didn't know before writing the book. And on the screen I have, it's actually available on YouTube, that link up there. If you look Dakota 38, it's available. It was okay. It was like, it doesn't tell the story of the whole history you told, but it's of some of the surviving Dakota tribesmen going back and sort of this pilgrimage. And it's sort of interesting film because, and much like the analogy of our current situation in Palestine, Americans know very little about the history of everything you just said, but a ton of the Dakota who you just mentioned, who I think it was like what we know as Minnesota now, at the end, the ones who were survived, this whole thing that you just talked about, are like put on basically boats on the river and sent to like the reservations. Like tons of the Native Americans who you find now in like North Dakota or Wyoming, wherever on these reservations, aren't from there. The way that like Gazans aren't from there, they were just sort of put there. And so this story talks about some of the Dakota tribesmen making a sort of pilgrimage back, and they're also a mess, right? Like the whole community is destroyed and everything. Good trivia to bring up at a party is the largest mass execution ever done in the United States. Who was the president that authorized it? No one guesses Abraham Lincoln, but it was, who hung, I think it was 38, may have been 37, 38 Dakota Indians in the same day. It was actually put on a postage stamp. It's kind of insane.
Not just in the same day, but literally in the same gallows.
They
constructed the gallows so that they could hang all of them at once with a single pull of the lever. And they invited, I think it was the family of one of the victims to come up and pull the lever. It was just a mass vengeance scheme.
There was like a famous painting of it done. Yeah, here,
Yeah, well,
I'll
there's a guy named,
share
I
it.
think his name was Stevens, who did a series of paintings,
Yeah,
and he traveled around for years, showing. Yes, this
yeah,
is
that's the
Stevens.
execution of the Native Americans there, the Dakota 38.
Yeah,
Actually,
he had several panels, and he would go around, and this was basically like, a movie before there were movies. He had this whole
yeah,
big narration for each
the
of the
narration,
panels as he
exactly.
was right.
But to that point, I did ages ago. I should get him on again, or reach out to him again because we never worked out for the interview. But I wanted this is a good suggestion. I mean, John, you're super learned. It's an awesome suggestion. But I forget his name now. He runs a podcast, and he's a Native American. Because I actually did want to speak to Native Americans about how they're experiencing the world. And he interviewed Macklemore back when he, the rapper who did the song for Hinbra Job, and he was very popular beforehand, but sort of made a splash. And I reached out to him, and we just haven't arranged a time to do an interview. But I think I will. I think that I'm going to reach out to him again because I am interested, as I'm sure all of you know, and clearly you are too, John, of connecting historical stories to what we're seeing in Palestine now. And yeah, I should probably go now. It's almost 7:30. But to that point, I just, while you were talking, I was flipping around a little bit. I made public to the members, so you guys should all have it. The interview that I have scheduled to release tomorrow to, I guess, the rest of the world with Melanie McAllister. So go watch that. And John, also, like, there's a time in our interview near the end. Actually, well, just a ton of the conversation with her is about narration, so you're going to like it a lot. She wrote this amazing book called Promises, Then the Storm, which you'll hear me give a pretty big ringing endorsement at the beginning for. I just think it's such a beautiful. It's a journal, a diary that she started keeping on October 5th, 2023. She's a professor, and she's been involved in the activist space in Palestine, amongst other causes, for her whole life. And I think it just wrote this incredible book, but it's got a ton of poetry in her book, a ton of music, a ton of narration, a ton of Darvish, the Mahmoud Darvish, the most famous Palestinian poet. So we read some of those together. I have her read some of those. So you're going to like a lot of that about the power of narration and the importance of narration. But also, to everything you just said, near the end of our conversation, we get into the topic of human rights. And she posits, and I'm curious how you think of her argument, so maybe email me after, that the era of human rights is over. And kind of the language around human rights has clearly collapsed. And now the conversations is kind of what comes next. She references Hannah Arendt, who I guess did some work on this about the right to have rights, which is kind of what you're talking about, John. Like, who has the right to have rights? And it just is like this endless regression into a black hole where you could justify killing anyone. And she puts out sort of a maybe very flowery sounding kind of planetary consciousness that must come next. But in sort of practical terms, and I really liked this, she talks about, and this is very close to my sort of philosophical heart, conversations and conceptions about self-determination outside of the narrow confines of nation states, right? Like the post-World War I Woodrow Wilson mantra of self-determination sort of was interpreted of, well, that means you get a nation state that you get to define, and then that is how you will determine yourself. And I like pushing on it a little bit more philosophically, of thinking outside completely, like, what are the conditions that we should be seeking, even individually, to self-determine, and kind of scrap the notion that it has to be through smaller and smaller partitions of ethnic groups that get to homogeneously define, what kind of nation state they want. On practical terms, when that comes to Israel-Palestine, you guys probably, I don't know, anyone on this call feels, or anyone watching this feels, is, I don't necessarily care if it's one state, two states, 5 states, a million states. What I want is self-determination and dignity. And I don't want to think just in terms of states and what the map looks like. And so I like that part of the conversation. I think it echoes a lot of what you were just arriving at in this sort of philosophical, like, the world beyond human rights. But let me
Well,
leave
as
it.
an anarchist,
Yeah.
I've actually arrived at position as well, right? I
There you
mean,
go.
for me,
Yeah.
the state is the maybe the sort of thing actually standing in the way
Well, you're speaking
of
to my heart as well, and Mr. David
of human
Graeber
rights.
are
But you know,
yeah, are anarchists.
I think Fanon was also onto that
Yeah.
because in there's this one passage that I particularly love in Wretched of the Earth. It
Yeah.
says, "For a colonized people, the most essential value, because the most meaningful, is first and foremost the land
Yes.
which must provide bread and naturally dignity. But this
Yeah.
dignity has nothing to do with human dignity. The colonized subject has never heard of such an ideal. All he has ever seen on his land is that he can be arrested, beaten, and starved with impunity. And no sermonizer on morals, no priest has ever stepped in to bear the blows in his place or share his bread. For the colonized to be a moralist quite plainly means silencing the arrogance of the colonist, breaking his spiral of violence, in a word, ejecting him outright from the picture." And
Amazing.
that
Yeah.
to me describes my entire political stance.
Yeah, well, loud and clear. Well, let me let everyone go. John, why don't you send me an email after you watch this one? I'm really curious what you think of it. But yeah, you're speaking to my anarchist heart now. But thank you guys. This was awesome. I went, we went for. I'll cut it down a little bit. Some of my hopefully you enjoyed that video. Yeah, do find the link because I think it'll close here, but I'll put it in the description too of that film I did ages ago. I'll just put this caveat now. It's not my favorite film in the world, but it whatever. It's a free film for you. And I did make, the Melanie McAllister thing live. And then if he's watching, just a thank you to Abba Lang, who's one of the members who was on here last time but couldn't make this live call, who is now my fellow Berliner. And like the second day I arrived in Berlin, he invited me out to this amazing show by Saul Williams, who, if people know Saul Williams, he's a really incredible poet and musician. I think he did some work with like Andre 3000. I might be getting that wrong. But it was an awesome, awesome show, beautiful show. So look up Saul Williams. He had really great poetry you would like a lot too, John. That's very Fanonish. So thank you, Abba, for that. And yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys next month. Mohammed, thank you for your thoughts. Miriam, thank you for yours and being here, and everyone watching. I hugely appreciate it. So yeah, I'll see you guys next week or next month, as it were. So last one of this year. Thanks, guys. That was awesome.